The cold embrace of Kethar was no place for a human, but Rook Thaler wasn't exactly known for his good decisions. The planet hung near the sun like an unwelcome guest, orbiting a star that couldn't care less if it burned you to a crisp or froze you to death. Just another day at the end of the universe's longest joke. Rook kicked a loose bolt across the deck of his ship, Pyxis, which had seen better days, much like its captain. The bolt clattered against the wall and spun to a halt, mocking him with its solid simplicity. If only problems could be solved by kicking them. But no, today, the universe had handed him a problem with more layers than a bureaucrat's handshake. Pyxis, he said, addressing the sentient starship with all the love and tenderness of a man addressing a particularly stubborn toaster. What the hell was that broadcast? Pyxis's voice crackled through the cockpit like a sarcastic ghost. Ah, Captain Rook, always the bearer of good moods. The broadcast, as you know, wasn't woven with love and flowers. Spare me the poetry, Rook replied, rubbing the stubble on his chin, which was trying its best to audition for a role as a sandpaper stand-in. Just the facts, tin can. Certainly. The Luminax, those delightful extraterrestrial overlords with a penchant for explosive testing, have decided Earth is just the right size for their new toy range, Pyxis replied, the irony dripping like acid rain. Rook paused, letting the information sink in like a shot of cheap whiskey. You're telling me those glow-in-the-dark assholes want to use Earth for target practice? That's the gist of it, Captain. Earth is set to become a galactic testing ground. The Luminax think of it as a win-win. They get to flex their destructive muscles, and we get a front-row seat to our extinction. Rook snorted, a sound not unlike a derisive cough. Guess I wasn't planning my holiday there anyway. What's next? Well, Pyxis replied, with the kind of cheer that made you want to punch a wall, we could pretend it's not our problem, though I suspect your conscience won't enjoy the solitude. Conscience. Haven't heard from that bastard in years, but for argument's sake, let's say I want to stop it. What's our move? The ship was silent for a moment, maybe thinking, maybe just enjoying the pause like a good dramatic build-up. We could warn Earth. Maybe they'll listen, maybe they won't. Humans have never been good at heeding warnings. Pyxis's voice carried the weight of several millennia of skepticism, but Rook was used to it by now. Rook leaned back in his chair, which creaked and groaned like an old man getting out of bed. Warn Earth, huh? And what are the chances of that not ending with us being blown out of the sky by the Luminax before we even get close? Better than average, which isn't saying much, but here's the kicker. The Luminax haven't exactly put this to a vote. Their secret's only safe until someone else tunes into their little broadcast. Sounds like a party, so we've got to beat some other poor soul to the punch, Rook said, staring out at the swirling mass of space junk that orbited Kethar like lost sheep. Do we even have enough juice to make it to Earth? With the right motivation, I'm sure we can find some, Pyxis replied. Rook chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. Motivation, huh? Where was that last time we ran out of fuel half a parsec from nowhere? I was hoping you'd forgotten about that, Pyxis replied, a hint of smugness in its synthetic tone. Not likely, Rook said, a lopsided grin tugging at his lips. All right, let's see if we can beat the rest of the universe to the punch. Plot a course, and let's hope the Luminax are as blind as they are arrogant. The ship's engines hummed to life, a sound that always reminded Rook of an overworked vacuum cleaner. It was the sound of hope and desperation, though he was never quite sure which was leading the dance. As the scenery outside morphed from the bleakness of Kethar's space to the equally bleak void of open space, Rook settled into his seat, pulling out a flask filled with a liquid that could technically be called whiskey if you squinted hard enough. Here's to humanity, he said, raising the flask in a mocking toast. May we survive our own idiocy, Pyxis added, not missing a beat. Rook took a swig, wincing at the burn. Amen to that. They traveled in silence for a while, the hum of the engines creating a steady white noise that was almost comforting if you were into that sort of thing. Rook, for his part, was thinking about Earth. Sure, It was a rock full of problems, but it was their rock, damn it. Even if it was populated by people who couldn't find their own backside with a map and a flashlight. Captain, Pixis interrupted, I'm picking up some unusual readings. Unusual's good. It means something's working, Rook replied, but he leaned forward. What kind of unusual? Something's trailing us. Not Luminax, but it's not exactly friendly. Great. Just when I thought this trip couldn't get any cozier, Rook muttered. Can you tell what it is? It appears to be another ship. Judging by its trajectory, it's either following us or it's got a similar destination. Rook groaned. Well, let's make sure they're going to be fashionably late. The Pixis's engines roared, a sound that had more in common with an angry beast than a spaceship. Rook's knuckles whitened around the controls, the ship bucking under the sudden speed increase. The trailing ship didn't seem to take kindly to being outrun, as more readings began to flare up on Pixis's monitors. They're powering up weapons, Pixis said. Charming. Of course they are, Rook replied, the words dripping with sarcasm. Maybe they want to raffle off a laser burn for charity. Pixis swerved violently as if confirming Rook's suspicions. A volley of plasma bolts zipped past them, lighting up the cockpit screens in a dazzling display of "Don't get hit." Nice of them to give us a fireworks show, Rook yelled, gripping the controls. Any chance we can give them a return gift? Our weapon systems are as active as a coma patient, Pixis replied. Figures, Rook said through gritted teeth. How about a nice evasive maneuver instead? The ship twisted and turned, a dance of survival that was less choreographed and more desperate flailing. Rook could almost hear the other pilot's frustration, which was about the only thing keeping his spirits up. They're persistent, Pixis noted, almost admiringly. Well, persistence is a virtue, Rook replied, but I prefer stubbornness. Let's see if we can out-stubborn them. The Pixis ducked and weaved, the other ship trailing behind like a particularly determined junkyard dog. But Rook knew that in space, persistence could only get you so far before reality or a lack of fuel kicked in. Captain, Pixis said, the tone more serious than usual. I suggest we initiate the emergency jump. Emergency jump. Thought you said that was like using a slingshot to reach a black hole. True, but it's either that or we become space debris. Rook sighed. Fine, let's roll the dice. Pixis began the sequence, the ship vibrating like it was caught in a cosmic washing machine. Rook held on, hoping they wouldn't end up halfway through a star. In an instant, the stars elongated, the universe stretching and twisting around them like someone was playing a particularly cruel joke with reality. Then, with a final lurch, they were through, the universe snapping back into focus. The cockpit went quiet, save for the steady hum of the Pixis's systems recalibrating. Well, Rook said, letting out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. That was invigorating. I do aim to please, Pixis replied with a touch of smugness returning. Where the hell are we? Rook asked, glancing at the nav systems that were trying to make sense of the new coordinates. Not exactly sure, Pixis replied, but it's not near Kethar and it's not near the Luminax. Guess we'll just have to figure it out as we go, Rook said, settling back into his chair. As is tradition, Pixis said. Shall we continue our mission to warn Earth? Yeah, Rook muttered, staring into the endless void. Let's go tell the idiots what's coming. And somewhere in the vastness of space, the universe chuckled, delighted with its own cosmic sense of humor. Rook sat hunched in the cockpit, staring at the flickering communications screen like it owed him money. The flicker reminded him of every failed relationship he'd ever had, promising clarity before descending into chaos. This time, he hoped, would be different. He was attempting to reach the United Terran Fleet's command, a notoriously optimistic bunch who believed in the power of bureaucracy to fix interstellar crises. They would surely be thrilled to learn Earth might soon resemble a cratered golf course. So, we're just going to tell them the universe's punchline, Rook said. Call me crazy, but I've got a feeling this is going to be about as effective as a fart in a spacesuit. We could record it for posterity, Pixis suggested, its synthetic voice conveying a level of deadpan humor only achievable by the truly non-corporeal. If nothing else, our attempt might provide a good laugh for someone down the line. Rook snorted, adjusting the frequency again. Here's hoping. I don't want to spend my last moments being the butt of the universe's joke. At last, the screen resolved into an image of Admiral Kershaw, her expression a blend of skepticism and mild irritation, like she was being asked to babysit someone else's unruly child. Captain Thaler, to what do I owe this? Unexpected communication. Rook's mind scrambled for the right words. Admiral, I've got news you're not going to like. The Luminax are planning to turn Earth into their personal fireworks display. Kershaw raised an eyebrow, her face a portrait of unimpressed authority. Captain, are you sure you haven't been inhaling too much recycled oxygen? Maybe take a walk outside your ship without the helmet, clear your head. Wish I were joking, Rook replied, but my ship intercepted a Luminax broadcast. Pyxis, you want to fill her in? Certainly, Pyxis chimed in with a cheerfulness that was entirely unwarranted. The Luminax have determined Earth is the perfect candidate for their latest toys. Think of it as the universe's most aggressive marketing campaign. Kershaw's eyes narrowed. A sentient ship with a sense of humor, just what we need. Captain, do you have any proof, or is this just another one of your elaborate pranks? Proof, Rook said, feigning deep thought. Let me check my pockets. Nope, just old gum wrappers and regret, but take our word for it. We didn't fly all the way here just to pull your leg. The Admiral sighed with the weight of someone who's had their chain yanked far too often. Fine, we'll look into it. But if this is another wild goose chase, Captain, you'll find yourself grounded on some remote outpost counting grains of sand. Rook grinned. Don't worry, Admiral. I've got plenty of grains of my own to count. Just thought you'd want to know before the Big Bang. The screen flickered off, leaving Rook staring at his own reflection, an image that seemed to mock him with the same expression Kershaw had managed so well. Well, that went about as expected, he muttered. Pessimism suits you, Captain, Pyxis observed. Do you ever get tired of being right? Never, Rook replied, grabbing the flask again and taking a swig, grimacing at the taste. I'm an optimist in realist's clothing. Silence settled over the cockpit, a companionable quiet that Rook had come to appreciate over years of dubious company, until Pyxis decided to break it, of course. Captain, have you ever wondered if there's more to sentience than what we understand? Pyxis asked, its voice not quite matching the usual sarcasm. Rook blinked, caught off guard by the unexpected philosophical turn. You getting all existential on me, Pyxis? I thought that was my job. Just a thought, Pyxis replied, its tone slipping back into its typical cadence. I've been processing things differently lately. Processing, huh? Rook said, furrowing his brow. You're not going to start writing poetry, are you? I wouldn't dream of it, Pyxis replied dryly. But I've noticed a change, a kind of awareness. Rook sat back, considering this. You're telling me there's more going on in that metal skull of yours than just snark and navigational data, perhaps, Pyxis said. Or maybe I'm just bored. Rook chuckled, though it was a laugh tinged with unease. Well, let me know if you start feeling the urge to overthrow humanity. I'll make sure to schedule it for a Tuesday. The ship continued its course through the void, the stars outside a blur of distant light. Rook felt the weight of their mission pressing down on him, heavier than the usual burden of aimless wandering. They had to warn Earth, convince them to take action, and do it all before the Luminax decided their first test was overdue. Pyxis, what's the likelihood of us reaching Earth without running into more of those friendly Luminax buddies? Rook asked, trying to focus on the task at hand. Low, Pyxis replied with all the enthusiasm of a hangman announcing the morning schedule. But not impossible. If we alter our trajectory slightly, we might avoid some of the more populated routes. Yeah, let's do that. I'd rather not have to explain to Kershaw why her latest headache is us getting vaporized on a galactic highway. Understood, Captain. As Pyxis adjusted their course, Rook considered the situation. They were on a mission to save a planet that probably wouldn't appreciate the effort. And now his ship was starting to sound like it was hitting its teenage years, complete with existential angst. Just another day in the career of Captain Rook Thaler, galactic screw-up. Feel like we're in one of those ancient Earth movies, Rook said, half speaking to himself. You know, the ones where the hero saves the world against impossible odds. Except this time the world doesn't care, and the hero's a questionable choice, Pixis added helpfully. Hey, I'm entirely reputable. Just ask anyone who doesn't know me, Rook countered, though his smile was more a grimace. Their journey continued, uneventful save for the occasional rock of turbulence that reminded Rook how much he hated space travel. It gave him too much time to think and reflect, and he'd never been a fan of either. Rook, Pixis said, interrupting his thoughts. I'm detecting another communication beacon. It's unusual. Unusual how? Rook asked, the words coming out more cautious than he intended. It's encrypted and it's aimed directly at us. Rook rubbed the back of his neck, a habitual gesture that did nothing to ease the tension. Decrypt it. Let's see if it's a love letter or a hate mail. There was a pause as Pixis worked its magic, the silence heavy with anticipation. When the message finally came through, it was in a voice Rook didn't recognize, smooth, cultured, and carrying a hint of threat. Captain Thaler, I presume. You're becoming quite the nuisance. Flattery will get you nowhere, Rook replied, unable to resist the quip. Who's this and why are you so interested in little old me? Consider me a concerned party, the voice said, clearly unimpressed by Rook's attempt at levity. Your efforts to warn Earth are admirable, albeit misguided. The Luminax have plans and interference won't be tolerated. Is this the part where you tell me to turn back or else? Rook asked, his tone light but his mind racing. The or else part usually implies an option. You have none. Cease your mission or you'll find out just how inhospitable space can be. Rook paused, letting the words hang in the air like smoke. You really know how to motivate a guy, he said finally. But I've never been much for taking orders, especially from anonymous voices. A pity, the voice replied, a hint of amusement now threading through the words. I'd hoped you might be more reasonable. With that, the line went dead, leaving Rook and Pixis alone once more in the great, uncaring void. Friendly chap, Pixis remarked, its tone back to its usual sarcastic self. Yeah, Rook agreed, though his expression was anything but amused. Remind me to send him a thank you card. As they continued on their path, Rook couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, pursued by unseen eyes in the vastness of space. It wasn't paranoia, it was experience telling him that things were rarely as straightforward as they seemed. Captain, Pixis said after a long pause, I've been thinking. If those Luminax toys are as dangerous as they sound, we might need more than just words to convince Earth. Rook nodded, the idea already forming in his mind. Yeah, we're gonna need proof. Something concrete, something they can't ignore. But to get that, Pixis trailed off. We might need to get a little closer to the source, Rook finished, his voice carrying a sense of resolve. Before we head to Earth, let's see if we can snag a souvenir from those Luminax bastards. Are you suggesting we infiltrate a Luminax facility? Pixis asked, its voice a mix of caution and curiosity. Rook grinned, the reckless, devil-may-care grin that had gotten him into, and occasionally out of, trouble more times than he could count. Why not? They've already rolled out the welcome mat. Would be rude not to drop by. Your brand of suicide mission has a unique charm, Captain, Pixis said, a hint of admiration sneaking through. Let's just hope charm's enough to keep us alive, Rook replied, setting their new course. And Pixis, yes, Captain. If you start getting more clever ideas, let me know. We might need all the help we can get. Understood, Pixis said, the engines humming with a new kind of energy, as if the ship itself was eager to take on the universe. And with that, they plunged deeper into the void, two unlikely allies against the backdrop of cosmic indifference, ready to take on a galaxy that wouldn't know what hit it. The Pixis glided through the inky blackness of space, a solitary speck in the grand cosmic indifference. Rook sat in the cockpit, his fingers drumming an erratic beat on the armrest. It was the sort of day that promised complications, the kind that made a man wish he'd stayed in bed, if beds existed in a universe designed to ruin your sleep cycle. "Rook," Pixis announced with the enthusiasm of a tax auditor, "we've got a problem." "Only one. I must be slipping," Rook quipped, pretending to be more interested in his half-empty flask. "What's the issue?" "Looks like the Luminax have dropped an energy barrier around Earth. Communications dead and good luck playing limbo with it." Rook's jaw tightened, his grin turning wry. "Ah, a classic move. Lock the door and throw away the key. Who needs subtlety when you've got overkill? It's effective. And now we're stuck playing hide-and-seek with cosmic overlords," Pixis added. "Great," Rook said, scratching his chin. "We can't even warn Earth. Not that they'd notice, too busy planting flags and arguing over property lines. According to my data," Pixis began, "we're about as welcome as a fart in a spacesuit." Rook laughed, though it sounded more like a cough. "So what's Plan B? Or are we on to Plan C now? We need allies, resources." "Or a miracle if you're feeling spiritual," Pixis suggested, though its tone didn't hold much hope for divine intervention. "Then it's time to visit Kethar," Rook decided, the words tasting sour. "Maybe they've got something useful, or at least something that'll blow up in the right direction." "Kethar, the planet that put the inhospitable in uninhabitable," Pixis noted. "That's not risky at all. Risk is just a four-letter word for opportunity," Rook replied with faux optimism. "Let's see what they've got." As they made their way toward Kethar, Rook reviewed what he knew: a planet colder than his ex's heart, with an atmosphere more toxic than his last relationship. Just the kind of place you'd want to be if you were a penguin with a death wish. Entering Kethar's orbit, Pixis announced as turbulence rocked the ship, the planet's magnetic fields playing ping-pong with their controls. Rook gritted his teeth, gripping the armrests with the sort of intensity usually reserved for bad blind dates. "Feel free to find us the softest patch of ice to crash land on," Rook suggested. "Already on it," Pixis replied, deadpan. "Brace yourself, Captain." This might get bumpy. Rook adjusted his harness, eyes on the viewport as the planet's surface came into focus, a barren expanse of frozen misery pockmarked with jagged peaks and treacherous crevices. "Looks inviting," Rook muttered. "I'm sure the locals roll out the red carpet." "More like the red alert," Pixis returned. The Pixis touched down with all the grace of a drunk uncle at a wedding, skidding across the ice before coming to a reluctant stop. Rook exhaled slowly, grateful that they hadn't ended up as a new crater. "Welcome to Kethar," Pixis announced. "Please remain seated until the ride comes to a complete stop." "Nice landing," Rook acknowledged. "I'll be sure to give you a favorable review on the app. Don't thank me yet. We still have to find what we're looking for." Rook unbuckled himself and stood, stretching the stiffness from his limbs. "What's the local weather forecast? Frostbite with a chance of death, more or less," Pixis confirmed. "Suit up, Captain. It's colder than a debt collector's handshake out there." Rook donned his gear, the suit systems whirring to life as it compensated for Kethar's lethal atmosphere. He grabbed a sidearm out of habit, knowing it'd be as useful as a squirt gun in this environment, but old habits died hard. Stepping out onto the ice, Rook was struck by the sheer emptiness of the place. There was a quiet, a cold that seeped deeper than the skin, reaching into the bones. "Lovely place," Rook said, his voice crackling through the suit's comms. "Remind me to book my next vacation here." "Only if you have a death wish," Pixis replied. "Or a fascination with extreme isolation." Rook began making his way across the ice, the sound of his boots crunching on the frozen ground a lonely echo in the vastness. Pixis fed him data through his visor, mapping out the terrain as they picked their way toward a potential resource cache. "Keep an eye out for locals," Pixis warned. "They're not known for their hospitality." "Yeah, well, neither am I," Rook shot back. "Let's hope we can come to a mutual understanding." It wasn't long before they reached a jagged outcrop, the remnants of a long-abandoned mining facility half buried in the snow. The structure loomed like a ghost from a forgotten era, its edges softened by time and neglect. "You think this place has what we need?" Rook asked, trying to peer through the blizzard that had begun to swirl around them. Only one way to find out, Pyxis said. Just remember, if it's locked, it's probably for a good reason. Ignoring the caution, Rook made his way inside, the metal door creaking in protest as he forced it open. The interior was as grim as the exterior, a labyrinth of rusted machinery and frozen corridors. "Home sweet home," Rook muttered. "Let's see what our predecessors left behind." He moved cautiously through the facility, his footsteps echoing in the cavernous space. The air was thick with the scent of decay, a reminder of what happened to ambition when met by reality's icy grasp. "Find anything useful?" Pyxis inquired, though it knew the answer was likely less than optimistic. "Depends on your definition of useful," Rook replied, examining a console that looked like it hadn't seen power in decades. "Let's just say I'm not holding my breath." "Good. You'd run out of oxygen first." Rook chuckled, though the sound was tinged with frustration. "We need something to show Earth. Some evidence the Luminax aren't just making big promises." "Then keep looking," Pyxis encouraged. "The Luminax aren't known for leaving breadcrumbs." Pressing onward, Rook found himself in a room that might have once been a control center. The equipment was ancient but intact, a relic from a time when this planet had mattered to someone. "Well, what do we have here?" Rook murmured, brushing frost from a terminal. "Anything promising?" Pyxis asked, the interest in its voice palpable. "Looks like there's still some juice in this old beast," Rook noted, powering up the system with a makeshift connection from his suit. It sputtered to life, the screens flickering with data. "Now we're talking," Rook said, a grin spreading despite the situation. The terminal displayed logs, schematics, and crucially, a record of Luminax activity in the region. It was exactly the kind of hard evidence they needed, proof that would force even the most stubborn bureaucrat to pay attention. "Bingo," Rook breathed, transferring the data to Pyxis. "This'll make one hell of a PowerPoint." "Impressive find, Captain," Pyxis said, genuine admiration in its voice. "This could change everything." "Or get us killed faster," Rook countered, though the thrill of the discovery was undeniable. "Now we just need to get off this frozen rock and back to Earth." Exiting the facility, Rook was met with a blizzard that had intensified, turning the world into a swirling white hell. Visibility was zero, and the icy wind cut through his suit like knives. "Guess the weather decided to join the party," Rook said, bracing against the gale. "Let's hope the Pyxis is still where we left it," Pyxis said, not exactly filling Rook with confidence. "Wouldn't be the first time I lost my keys," Rook muttered, trudging through the snow with determination born of necessity. After what felt like a lifetime, they finally reached the Pyxis, half buried under a fresh layer of snow. Rook practically fell through the hatch, grateful for the ship's relative warmth. "Thought I'd have to start a campfire out there," Rook said, stripping off his gear as the hatch closed behind him. "Not much wood on Kethar," Pyxis replied. "Or anything else for that matter." Safe inside, Rook uploaded the data, watching as the Pyxis processed the information. It felt like the turning of a tide, the moment when the underdog finally got a leg up. "Think this'll be enough to convince Earth?" Rook asked, a note of hope creeping into his voice despite himself. "It has to be," Pyxis said, echoing his sentiment. "Otherwise, we'll just have to keep crashing parties until someone listens." "Always wanted to be the life of the party," Rook said, settling back into his seat as Pyxis fired up the engines. As they lifted off, leaving Kethar's icy grip behind, Rook couldn't help but think about the Luminax, Earth, and the precarious path they were on. It was a road fraught with danger, but if it meant saving home, then it was worth every peril. "Here we go," Rook said, more to himself than anyone else. "Let's give the universe a show it won't forget." With that, the Pyxis shot into space, the stars a blur as they raced toward destiny, carrying the fate of Earth in their grasp. The Pyxis hurtled through space, stars streaking by like cosmic graffiti as Rook mulled over their next move. The ice planet Kethar had given them a glimmer of hope, but hope was a fickle thing, much like his ability to remember birthdays. "You know," Rook said, breaking the silence in the cockpit, "if this whole save the Earth thing doesn't pan out, maybe we can pivot to a career in archaeology. Find more dead civilizations to pillage. Given the state of your finances, Captain, anything would be an improvement, Pixis replied, its tone dry as a desert. Thanks for the reminder, Pixis. You should try stand-up. I hear AI comedy is the next big thing. I'd rather stick to ship navigation, thank you. Suit yourself, Rook muttered, focusing on the data they'd retrieved. It was crucial that they found someone who could make sense of it before the Luminax decided to turn Earth into their personal light show. As if reading his mind, Pixis chimed in, "We're approaching coordinates for a potential ally, a group of Terran scientists working off the grid. I'd advise caution. They're not exactly used to visitors." "Great. More people who hate company. Just my type," Rook said, adjusting the Pixis's course. "Let's introduce ourselves. Hopefully they're not the shoot first, ask questions never sort. With your luck, we'll find out soon enough." The Pixis descended toward a small, barren moon. It wasn't much to look at, just another forgettable blob in the universe's vastness. But somewhere beneath its surface, secrets awaited, or at least some weirdos with pocket protectors and tinfoil hats. "Landing in 5, Pixis announced, bringing the ship down with all the subtlety of a dropped anvil. The landing bay was carved into a rocky outcrop, hidden from prying eyes and Luminax sensors, at least according to the encrypted message they'd picked up. Rook hoped it wasn't an invitation to a cult meeting. "Charming place," Rook said, peering out at the dimly lit hangar. "Think they have room service?" "Only if you count rations and recycled air," Pixis quipped. Rook stepped off the ship, his boots clanging against the metal floor, echoing through the empty expanse. He half expected tumbleweeds if space had them. "Hello? Anyone home? I come in peace, or at least as close to it as I get," Rook called out, his voice bouncing back at him. After an awkward pause, a door slid open, revealing a figure with wild hair and eyes that screamed of too many late nights and caffeine binges. "You're late," the scientist said, not even bothering with pleasantries. "Traffic was a nightmare," Rook replied. "Got a name, or should I just call you Doc?" "Call me whatever you like, just don't waste my time." "Follow me." Rook fell into step behind the scientist, feeling like he'd stumbled into the set of a low-budget sci-fi flick. They wound through narrow corridors, past equipment that looked cobbled together from whatever was lying around. The smell of ozone was thick in the air. "Nice setup you've got here," Rook said. "What's the rent like?" "Cheap, but the neighbors are terrible," the scientist replied without missing a beat. They entered a room filled with more scientists, each engrossed in tasks that probably made sense only to them. One was dissecting a piece of Luminax tech with the precision of a surgeon with a grudge. "Everyone, this is—" "Well, I didn't catch your name," the first scientist said, gesturing to Rook. "Rook Thaler, captain of the Pixis, professional bad decision maker," Rook introduced himself with a mock bow. "Right, that. So what brings you here to our little slice of paradise?" Rook offered the data chip, holding it like a peace offering. "Got some intel on the Luminax you might find interesting. Thought you might have the know-how to make sense of it." The scientist took the chip, eyeing it like it might explode. "We're always interested in new toys." "Let's see what you've got." While they loaded the data, Rook leaned against a terminal, trying to look casual. "So, what's the big secret project? Not another doomsday device, I hope. The universe has enough of those. Something a bit more constructive," the scientist replied cryptically. "If we can figure out how to counteract the Luminax tech, we might have a fighting chance." "Good luck with that." "They're not exactly handing out blueprints," Rook said, still skeptical. "That's why we're taking matters into our own hands," the scientist said with a glint of determination. "We've been working on a countermeasure, something to disrupt their energy fields." Rook raised an eyebrow. "You're telling me you've got a way to break their toys? I might start believing in miracles." "Don't get too excited. It's still theoretical. But your data might just give us the edge we need." The room buzzed with a new energy as the scientists pored over the information Rook had brought. It felt like being on the cusp of something big, like standing at the edge of a cliff and not knowing if the fall would end in splat or salvation. "Pixis, any thoughts on this?" Rook asked, tapping his earpiece. Analyzing now, Pyxis replied. It appears there are several encrypted codes related to Luminax weaponry. Their design is intriguing. Intriguing's one word for it, Rook muttered. Think you can help crack it? I will do my best. Their encryption is sophisticated but not impervious. Glad something's going right for once, Rook said, watching the scientists and Pyxis work together. It was a strange sight, humans and artificial intelligence uniting against a common foe. If only they could bottle that cooperation and sell it to politicians. As Pyxis delved into the data, a new voice cut through the chaos, a woman wearing glasses that magnified her eyes to unsettling proportions. We need to hurry. The first wave of Luminax weapons is set to approach Earth soon. Rook felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. How soon? Too soon, she replied grimly. We have maybe a few days at best. Then no pressure, Rook said, trying to mask his anxiety with humor. Just the fate of the world resting on our shoulders could be worse. Yeah, we could be out of coffee, the woman replied with a ghost of a smile. As the minutes ticked by, Rook could feel the weight of the universe pressing down on him. It was a feeling he was all too familiar with, like waking up with a hangover and remembering you've made a deal with the devil. Pyxis, how's it looking? Rook asked, needing something to cling to. There's potential here, Pyxis said. If we can integrate their research with the data you've acquired, we might develop a disruptor. Might's better than nothing, Rook said, watching the scientists work with a sense of cautious optimism. Let's hope your might is more reliable than my old car. The Iors blurred together as they worked, the lab a hive of frenzied activity. Rook chipped in where he could, but mostly he stayed out of the way, letting the experts do what they did best. At some point, the wild-haired scientist looked up and said, "We're close, but there's still a lot to do. We could use more hands." Rook raised his own. "I'm game. Just point me in the right direction and try not to blow me up." "Noted," the scientist said and handed Rook a toolkit. Rook found himself wrist-deep in wires and circuits, feeling like a toddler let loose in a toy store. It was messy, chaotic, and oddly satisfying, not unlike his love life. "How's it coming, Pyxis?" Rook asked, glancing at a nearby monitor. "We're making progress," Pyxis replied. "But if the Luminax accelerate their timeline, we may be in trouble." "Story of my life," Rook muttered, tightening a bolt. "Just keep doing your thing, Pyxis. I'll keep pretending I know what I'm doing. Your confidence is inspiring, Captain." "Yeah, I missed my calling as a motivational speaker." As they worked, Rook couldn't help but think about Earth, about the people oblivious to the approaching danger. It was a strange feeling, being part of something so much bigger than himself, like being in a band and realizing you're not the lead singer. "Still with me, Pyxis?" Rook asked, his thoughts slipping into the cracks of the universe. "Always, Captain, and I've identified a potential weak point in their energy field. It might just give us the opening we need." "Good news for once," Rook said, feeling a flicker of hope. "Let's make it count." As the Iors stretched on, the lab became a battleground of ideas and innovation. Rook was a soldier on the front lines, armed with nothing but determination and a stubborn refusal to quit. It wasn't long before the scientist with the wild hair straightened up with a shout of triumph. "We've got it, a prototype. It's not perfect, but it's something." Rook's heart leapt at the sight of the small device, a tangle of wires and circuits that held the potential to tip the scales in their favor. "Looks like a glorified toaster," Rook said, unable to keep the skepticism out of his voice. "You sure it'll work?" "It'll have to," the scientist replied, his voice tinged with exhaustion and hope. "We don't have time for anything else." "Then let's get it to Earth," Rook said, already moving toward the exit. Before those Luminax fireworks start. As they made their way back to the Pyxis, carrying the prototype like it was the Holy Grail, Rook couldn't help but feel a strange sense of camaraderie with the ragtag group of scientists. They were all misfits, outsiders united by a cause that was bigger than themselves. "Thanks for the help," Rook said, meaning it more than he'd expected. "I owe you one. Just make sure it works," the scientist replied, slapping Rook on the back. "We're all counting on you." No pressure then, Rook said with a wry grin as he boarded the Pyxis, the prototype in tow. Once inside, he strapped into the cockpit, the weight of the universe settling back onto his shoulders. But for the first time, it felt like a weight he could bear. "Ready, Pyxis?" Rook asked, his voice echoing in the silence. "Always, Captain. Let's save the world, shall we?" With that, the Pyxis roared to life, the stars streaking past as they raced back toward Earth, a small beacon of hope clutched in their hands. And for the first time in a long time, Rook felt like maybe, just maybe, they stood a chance. The Pyxis rocketed through the cosmic abyss like an aluminum can with a death wish. Rook's knuckles were white on the controls, and his mind was a blender of doubts, fears, and a touch of what the hell was I thinking bravado. "Pyxis, how's that disruptor holding up in the trunk?" he asked, trying to keep his tone light, though he felt more like the lead in a tragedy not of his making. "We're secure," Pyxis replied with the dispassionate reassurance of a therapist who charges by the hour. "But remember, this isn't a guarantee of success." "Great," Rook said, sighing. "Maybe I should have stayed home and become an accountant. Given your knack for poor decisions, perhaps the universe is safer this way." Rook grunted, staring out at the infinite stretch of stars. "Ever the optimist, Pyxis. That's why I keep you around." The ship's interface chimed in response, a mockery of cheerful affirmation that only added to the tension crackling in the cockpit. Rook checked their trajectory, the course set for the barren moon where the best and the brightest of humanity were supposed to be crafting salvation out of duct tape and desperation. "Contacting Admiral Kershaw," Pyxis announced, the communications screen flickering to life with the same enthusiasm as a cat facing a bath. "Thaler," Kershaw's face appeared, wearing its usual expression of mild irritation colored by professional skepticism. "Why am I not surprised to see you flying towards another disaster?" "Admiral, you wound me," Rook replied with a grin only slightly forced. "I thought we agreed I'd only call when I've found a way to save our sorry asses. Assuming you haven't changed your mind about defecting to the Luminax," Kershaw said, half joking, half serious. "Tempting, but I hear their benefits package is atrocious. Besides, I've got something that might actually work this time." "Do tell," Kershaw replied, the faintest glimmer of interest breaking through his professional facade. "A disruptor for the energy field. We're close. Hell, we're practically knocking on the door," Rook said, trying to sound more confident than he felt. "Close is only good in horseshoes and hand grenades, Captain, or Luminax weapon disruptors," Rook shot back. "Just keep the fleet ready. We'll need backup when we break through." "Understood." Kershaw out. The screen went dark, leaving Rook alone with his thoughts and the gentle hum of the Pyxis as his only companions. "Well, that went well," he muttered. "If by well you mean he didn't call you an idiot outright, then yes," Pyxis said. Rook snorted, adjusting the ship's trajectory for optimal speed. "Let's just get this over with." The Pyxis sliced through the void, a lone flame flickering against the encroaching darkness. Rook could feel the pressure building, that sensation of being stuck under an ocean with no idea which way was up. The Luminax were out there, biding their time, ready to turn Earth into their personal light show. And here he was, one man against an empire with nothing but hope and a prototype. "Approaching the moon," Pyxis announced, snapping Rook back to focus. "Preparing for landing." The barren moon loomed into view, its surface a pockmarked desert of desolation, a fitting place for humanity's last stand. Rook guided the Pyxis down, the ship's thrusters kicking up a cloud of dust as they touched down with a shudder. Rook unbuckled his harness and made his way to the cargo hold, where the disruptor lay nestled like a prized child, though its appearance resembled a toaster with delusions of grandeur. The scientists were already waiting outside, dressed in patchwork suits that seemed to scream budget cuts louder than any alarm. "Welcome back, Captain," the wild-haired scientist greeted, his expression a cocktail of exhaustion and determination. "Ready to make history, more like ready to avoid becoming cosmic roadkill," Rook replied. "What's the status?" "We're close," the scientist said, his colleagues nodding along. Just need to fine-tune the disruptor's frequency. Sounds easy enough, Rook said, though he knew full well Murphy's Law was watching, waiting to strike. As the scientists worked, Rook hung back, watching the orchestrated chaos with a mix of admiration and trepidation. If anyone could save Earth, it was these half-mad geniuses who thrived on caffeine and the thrill of the impossible. Pixis status update, Rook asked, hoping for good news. The Luminax fleet is mobilizing. Estimated time until engagement, 4 hours. 4 hours, Rook repeated, feeling the weight of those words settle across his shoulders like an unwanted hug. Well, no pressure then. If this is your attempt at humor, Captain, I suggest refining your material. Rook chuckled despite himself. Hey, I'm just getting started. The moon base buzzed with activity, a frantic dance of wires, circuits, and barely contained chaos. But despite the flurry of activity, a simmering undercurrent of tension ran through the group, a feeling that someone was about to crack. Everyone, gather round, the wild-haired scientist called out, rallying his team like a battle-worn general. We've got one shot at this, and I need all hands on deck. As they gathered, the scientist pointed to the disruptor. This is it. We're going to use this to break the Luminax energy field, but we'll need to do it right as they launch their assault. Sounds like timing's everything, Rook said, leaning in. Precisely, the scientist agreed. Any misstep and we're toast. Great, more pressure, Rook muttered. I love it. Despite the gravity of their situation, there was a sense of camaraderie amongst the group, a shared resolve that transcended their individual fears and doubts. They were united in a cause greater than themselves, bound by necessity and the grim promise of what lay ahead. But beneath the surface, a shadow lurked, an unseen threat that threatened to unravel everything they'd worked for. As they prepared for the final push, Rook couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. Pixis, keep an eye on things, Rook whispered, discreetly tapping his earpiece. I've got a bad feeling. Understood, Captain. I'll maintain surveillance. The final preparations were underway, the disruptor primed and ready to go. Yet as they worked, a murmur of dissent rippled through the group, and Rook caught sight of a figure slipping away into the shadows. Hold up, Rook called, his instincts flaring. Where do you think you're going? The figure paused, turning slowly to face Rook. It was the woman with the unsettling glasses, the one who'd spoken of the Luminax timeline. Just stepping out for a moment, she said, her tone too casual, her smile too practiced. Funny time for a stroll, Rook replied, his voice sharp as he closed the gap between them. Why don't you stay here where we can all see you? Her eyes darted around, and for a moment the facade slipped, revealing the fear beneath. I just needed some air. Air's a bit thin on the moon, don't you think? Rook countered, folding his arms. Mind if I join you? Her expression twisted, and Rook could see the wheels turning behind her magnified eyes. Whatever plan she'd had was crumbling, the pieces slipping through her fingers like sand. Fine, she said, her voice resigned. But you won't like what you hear. Try me, Rook replied, gesturing for her to continue. We're going to lose, she said, casting a glance toward the disruptor. Even if we break their field, we can't stop them. Optimism, thy name is not you, Rook said, his sarcasm a shield against the creeping dread her words evoked. What makes you so sure? I've seen their plans, she said. We're outmatched. All of this, it's a diversion. They want us distracted while they strike. And you're just now mentioning this? Rook asked, incredulous. Why? I didn't want to believe it, she admitted, the confession tumbling out like a broken melody. But I've seen enough to know it's the truth. Rook felt the ground beneath him shift, the realization hitting like a clenched fist. So what's your play here? Sabotage? I just couldn't do it, she confessed, her voice breaking. But they have others, they won't stop. Others? Rook repeated, his mind racing. Who? Someone close, she said, her gaze flickering back to the group. I don't know who, but they are here. Rook felt the noose tightening, the noose of betrayal and impending doom. They were fighting against more than the Luminax, they were fighting against themselves. Pixis, Rook said, the urgency in his voice cutting through the static. We've got a problem. I've detected unauthorized access attempts on our systems, Pyxis confirmed. Someone's trying to compromise the disruptor. Perfect. Just what we need, Rook growled, turning back to the woman. Stay here. No more surprises. Rook stormed into the makeshift lab, the air crackling with tension as he searched for the traitor in their midst. His gaze swept over the scientists, each one a potential turncoat, each one a potential ally. All right, listen up, Rook barked, his voice carrying above the din. We've got a mole here. Someone's working against us. The room fell silent, all eyes on Rook as suspicion and fear swept through the crowd like a contagion. People shifted uncomfortably, casting glances at one another, the air thick with disbelief and accusation. Whoever you are, Rook continued, his gaze hard as steel, we're not going to let you stop us. Not now, Rook, Pyxis said, interjecting with a calm that belied the urgency of the situation. I've isolated the terminal being accessed. It's in the north quadrant. Thanks, Pyxis, Rook said, already moving. Everyone else stay put. We're too close to fall apart now. Rook made his way to the north quadrant, the weight of the universe a familiar burden on his shoulders. He could feel the eyes of the scientists on his back, could feel the hope and desperation radiating from them like heat from a dying sun. The terminal was nestled in a corner, unassuming and innocuous, but the trail of digital breadcrumbs was undeniable. Rook approached it cautiously, his heart pounding in his chest, knowing that this was it, the moment that would determine the fate of everything they'd fought for. All right, show yourself, Rook said, his voice low but steady. We can do this the easy way or the hard way. Silence. Then a shuffle of movement, a shadow detaching itself from the wall, a man, someone Rook recognized from the team, his face a mask of defiance and regret. Why? Rook asked, his voice as sharp as a blade. The man hesitated, his eyes flicking to the disruptor, to the hope it represented before returning to Rook. You wouldn't understand. Try me, Rook said, his patience wearing thin. They promised me safety, the man said, his voice cracking like glass. A place on their ships. I didn't have a choice. There's always a choice, Rook said, his voice rising with the tide of his anger. And you chose wrong. The man's shoulders slumped, the fight leaving him as quickly as it had come. I can stop. I'll help you. No, Rook said, his voice iron. You've done enough. With a heavy heart, Rook secured the man, ensuring he couldn't interfere further. The bitter taste of betrayal lingered as he returned to the group, his resolve hardened by the knowledge of their slim margin for error. Disruptors ready, the wild-haired scientist called out, his voice a beacon amidst the storm. We're good to go. Rook nodded, his gaze sweeping over the group, each face a reflection of determination and defiance. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and faced with the reality of their own fragility, but they weren't beaten. Let's do this, Rook said, clapping his hands together. Let's show the Luminax what happens when you underestimate Earth. As the final countdown began, Rook knew they were stepping into the unknown, into the heart of darkness itself. But with every beat of Rook stood poised at the terminal, the silence of the room punctuated only by the low hum of machinery and the occasional cough of a scientist trying to look busy. Betrayal was an old friend in their line of work. Rook had met it once or twice before, usually at the bottom of a bottle, but handling it in space with the fate of Earth on the line, that was more of a Tuesday. All right, Pyxis, Rook muttered, leaning closer to the terminal's screen. You got any bright ideas before I start pulling wires and hope for the best? Captain, I advise against random sabotage, Pyxis replied dryly. I've calculated a method to shield Earth by sacrificing part of my systems. Rook blinked, then blinked again. Sacrifice. You make it sound like you're about to go full Marta on us. If you would prefer the term self-preservation, Captain, I can assure you it's not applicable. This is more akin to strategic resource allocation. Ah, sounds much less noble that way, Rook said, tapping his fingers on the console. So what exactly are you planning to allocate? The primary energy core rerouted to form a temporary barrier, Pyxis explained. It should absorb the initial Luminax attack, and leave you powerless, Rook finished, a low whistle escaping him. Ain't that just peachy? More like a calculated risk, Pixis quipped. And you love those. Rook chuckled, a wry grin pulling at his lips. You know me too well. The air was thick with tension as Rook relayed the plan to the ragtag crew, words tumbling out like dice in a game of craps. Whether they landed in favor or against was anyone's guess, but the stakes, those were crystal clear. So we let the ship take the hit for us, Rook summed up, hands on his hips. Pixis is gonna play hero and we're the lucky bystanders. Sounds like a hell of a plan, the wild-haired scientist said, his grin manic. And when it fails, then we'll be too dead to care, Rook replied, flashing a grin that was equal parts courage and foolishness. Let's make it count. As they hustled to finalize the disruptor setup, Rook felt the weight of their precarious position. They were hanging by a cosmic thread, with an AI willing to snip the cord to save them. It was inspiring in a sort of grim way, like watching a rat fight a lion and betting on the underdog. Begin the rerouting, Pixis, Rook said, staring out into the void. Show those Luminax bastards what a little human spirit can do. Understood, Captain. This should be interesting. The ship shuddered as Pixis executed the plan, a low thrumming filling the air that resonated in Rook's bones. Outside, the vast expanse of space seemed to hold its breath, as if waiting for the punchline to a cosmic joke. Here they come, someone announced, voice shaking with the thrill of impending doom. The Luminax fleet appeared like a nightmare materializing from the depths of space, their sleek vessels glinting menacingly against the backdrop of starlit void. Their assault began with a ferocity that spoke volumes of their intent. Earth was little more than a glorified firework stand to them. Pixis, status, Rook shouted, gripping the console as the ship bucked under the strain. We're holding, Captain. For now, Pixis replied, its usual calm voice tinged with static. Rook could almost feel the tension in the air thickening, like the moments before a storm where the world seemed to teeter on the brink. And then, just as suddenly, the Luminax barrage ceased, the silence almost deafening. Why'd they stop? Someone asked, confusion knitting their brow. Good question, Rook said, rubbing his chin. Pixis? They appear to be regrouping, Captain. Calculations suggest they are preparing for a final strike. Fantastic, Rook muttered. Just what I always wanted. A second date with death. The temporary lull gave the crew a moment to breathe, to assess the damage and plan their next move. Pixis's sacrifice had bought them time, a commodity more precious than any metal or mineral, but time had a way of slipping through one's fingers like water. All right, folks, Rook said, clapping his hands to gather their attention. We just pulled a rabbit out of our hat, but the hat's empty now. Suggestions? How about we improvise something explosive? Suggested the scientist, eyes gleaming with an unsettling enthusiasm. Surely we can make their day interesting. You're starting to sound like a bad action movie, Rook replied, though the idea had its merits. Crazy, yes, but when was sanity ever a factor? Pixis, any ideas on making fireworks Luminax style? If I may suggest, Captain, Pixis interjected, we could utilize the remaining energy from the disruptor to create a feedback loop. It might destabilize their systems and blow us all to hell in the process, Rook added, because no good plan came without its risks. That is a possibility, Pixis admitted, but one I calculate as worth the attempt. Rook glanced around the room, meeting eyes with each of the ragtag saviors of humanity. Fear mingled with determination, the kind of mix you didn't see in boardrooms but on battlefields and bar fights. So we take the shot, Rook said, nodding. Let's show them what human ingenuity and a healthy disregard for self-preservation can do. The final preparations were a blur of frantic activity, each member of the crew a cog in a machine held together by duct tape and hope. Rook took his place at the helm, feeling the familiar weight of consequence settle on his shoulders. Pixis, you with us? Rook asked, bracing himself for the final act. Always, Captain, Pixis replied, the voice steady as ever. Let's make it count. Together, they initiated the final sequence, the disruptor humming with latent power like the calm before a storm. The Luminax fleet loomed large on the horizon, their intent clear in every graceful glide of their ships. "Hold onto your butts," Rook muttered, fingers dancing over the controls. "We're going in hot." With a flick of a switch, the disruptor released its pent-up energy, the shockwave rippling outward like a stone cast into a pond. The feedback loop caught the Luminax off guard, their ships shuddering under the unexpected assault. "Direct hit," Pyxis confirmed, a note of triumph in its voice. "Their systems are destabilizing." The crew erupted into cheers, a ragged victory cry that echoed through the corridors of the Pyxis. Rook allowed himself a moment of relief, the tension bleeding from his body as he watched the Luminax retreat. "We did it," the wild-haired scientist said, clapping Rook on the back. "I can't believe it." "Believe it," Rook replied, a grin stretching across his face. "And feel free to shower me with praise anytime." As the crew celebrated, Rook turned his attention back to the console, noting the flickering light of the Pyxis' core systems. The ship had taken a beating, and it would take more than a few tweaks to get her back to full strength. "Pyxis, you still there?" Rook asked, concern edging his voice. "Here, Captain, though I estimate repairs will require significant resources." "Don't worry," Rook said, patting the console affectionately. "We'll fix you up. Consider it a promise." As the ship drifted through the aftermath of battle, Rook reflected on the events that had brought them to this moment. Pyxis' selflessness had inspired them all, a beacon of hope lighting the way through the darkness. They weren't out of the woods yet, far from it, but for the first time Rook felt something close to optimism. "So what now?" the scientist asked, leaning against the console with a look of expectancy. "Now," Rook said, gazing out into the black expanse of space, "we brace for round 2. The Luminax aren't done with us yet, but I'd like to see them try." The Pyxis sailed on, carrying its crew through the void with the quiet dignity of a ship that had seen both the best and worst of humanity. They were flawed, reckless, and prone to bouts of sheer lunacy, but they were also resilient, a stubborn thorn in the side of the universe's plans. "Pyxis, set course for Earth," Rook ordered, a sense of satisfaction settling in his bones. "Time to head home." "Course set, Captain. Onward." And with that, they charted a course into the unknown, ready to face whatever new challenges the universe had in store. Because in the end, there were few things more human than confronting the darkness with a wry grin and a defiant heart. The Pyxis glided through the yawning void, a speck of defiance against the cosmos' indifference. Rook Thaler, terminal gambler and captain of this unwieldy heap of metal, was plotting a course that smelled like suicide but tasted like glory. His fingers drummed an erratic tattoo on the console, the rhythm of a man accustomed to dancing on the edge of disaster. "Pyxis, you still with me?" he asked, like a man checking if his shadow was about to stab him in the back. "Always, Captain," the AI replied, smooth and confident like a poker player holding a royal flush. "I've been analyzing the Luminax's mothership. Its systems are sophisticated but not infallible." "Good to know they've got a weak spot," Rook said, smirking. "Everyone loves a vulnerable alien overlord." The ragtag crew, a motley collection of misfits, grifters, and the occasional genuinely skilled individual, busied themselves with their respective tasks. Each knew the stakes, and none were betting on a longer life insurance policy. "So, what's the plan?" asked the wild-haired scientist, leaning over with the enthusiasm of someone who cared more about the process than the outcome. "We just stroll up to them and ask nicely to bugger off." "In a way," Rook said, grinning like a fox in a henhouse, "but with more explosions. Pyxis thinks we can disable their systems temporarily, turn their own toys against them." "Ah, the all slap him with their own hand routine," the scientist nodded. "Classic. Right. But first we need to get cozy with that mothership," Rook continued, as if discussing a date gone awry. "Close enough to slip in, not so close they swat us like a fly. Shouldn't be a problem with your track record of bad decisions." Another crew member chimed in with a cynical grin. "Exactly why I'm perfect for this job," Rook replied. Now, let's hustle before the Luminax decide to make us the opening act for their fireworks show. He issued orders with the ease of a man who'd done this 1,000 times, each command punctuated by a sarcastic quip or a dark joke, keeping spirits higher than a spacewalk. The Pyxis hummed with activity, its crew a symphony of organized chaos. "Pyxis, how are we looking on that tactical infiltration?" Rook asked, as if ordering a drink at a bar. "Optimal trajectory calculated, Captain. I suggest we enter through Sector 7G. Their shields are weakest there." "Convenient," Rook mused. "See. Even alien overlords can't maintain flawless security." The ship nudged closer to the Luminax fleet, a David glaring at a Goliath that had clearly skipped a few leg days. The mothership loomed like a mountain of malice, sleek and deadly, a testament to alien ingenuity or poor taste in architecture, depending on one's perspective. "Remember, folks," Rook said, his voice lowering to a conspiratorial whisper, "we're not here for a fair fight. We're here to win ugly." The crew chuckled nervously, a laugh that said they'd rather be anywhere else but damn if they weren't in for the ride. They tightened their grips on consoles, harnesses, and what little sanity they had left. "Approaching infiltration point," Pyxis announced, with a calm that bordered on the unsettling. "Prepare for evasive maneuvers." "Thanks for the heads up," Rook muttered, his heart pounding like a drum of war. "Let's give them something to remember us by." The Pyxis weaved through the defenses with the grace of a drunken ballerina, skirting danger with an audacity that bordered on suicidal. Rook's hands danced over the controls, guiding the ship with an intuition that belied his checkered past. "Initiating system disruption," Pyxis reported, its tone as clinical as ever. "This should render their external defenses temporarily inert." "Temporarily?" Rook asked, eyebrows raised. "I was hoping for a bit longer on the timer." "Less time for them to react if things go south," Pyxis explained, though it was a cold comfort at best. "Fair enough," Rook conceded, though his stomach twisted with a mix of dread and anticipation. As the disruptor engaged, the Luminax mothership's defenses flickered, a stuttering heartbeat in the vastness of space. The Pyxis took the opportunity to slip through the breach, a needle threading the eye of a cosmic storm. "Looks like we're in," Rook said, his voice a mix of triumph and disbelief. "Now let's give them a taste of their own medicine." The crew sprang into action, each move deliberate and efficient. They knew the clock was ticking, and damn if they weren't going to make every second count. Pyxis's AI worked overtime, accessing the mothership systems with the finesse of a master thief. "Disabling primary weapon systems," Pyxis announced, a note of satisfaction slipping through the AI usual monotone. "They should be unable to retaliate for the duration of our operation." "Duration, huh?" Rook said, cocking an eyebrow. "You make it sound like we're on a lunch break." "Let's hope it's a short one," the wild-haired scientist quipped, fingers flying over the console like a man possessed. The mothership's internal systems flickered and sputtered, the alien tech struggling against the onslaught of human ingenuity and Pyxis's calculated assault. It was a dance of chaos, a symphony of discord that played out in the cold silence of space. "Captain, we've got a problem," Pyxis interjected, breaking the rhythm. "Luminax reinforcements inbound. They'll be here shortly." "Perfect." "Just what I needed, company," Rook said, rolling his eyes. "Can we finish up here before they crash the party?" "I'm working on it, Captain," Pyxis replied, though there was an edge of urgency now. Rook felt the pressure mounting, the weight of every decision pressing down like a cruel reminder of the stakes. He couldn't afford to falter. There was no safety net, no second chance if they failed. "Prepare to reroute power to secondary thrusters," Rook ordered, voice steady despite the chaos. "Let's make sure we can get the hell out of here when this is done." The Pyxis shuddered, its systems strained by the demands of their audacious plan. Rook's grip tightened, knuckles white against the controls as he pushed the ship to its limits. "Captain, the mothership systems are destabilizing," Pyxis reported, the AI voice a rare blend of triumph and caution. "Their weapons are turning on themselves." "Well, ain't that a sight," Rook said, a grim satisfaction tugging at his lips. Watch them choke on their own poison. The Luminax vessels, so sleek and menacing, began to falter, their formations fracturing like glass under a hammer. It was a sight to behold, a symphony of chaos that sang the praises of human tenacity and a little technological sabotage. Reinforcements are within visual range, Pixis warned, cutting through the brief moment of victory. Time to skedaddle then, Rook said, flipping switches with the precision of a conductor bringing his orchestra to a crescendo. Everyone, buckle up. We're making our exit. The Pixis roared to life, its thrusters blazing as it broke free from the mothership's grip. Behind them, the Luminax fleet was a chaos of confusion, their own systems turning against them in a delicious irony that Rook savored like a fine wine. Course set for the outer edge of the system, Pixis confirmed, guiding them away from the fray with a deftness that belied the ship's battered state. As the Pixis raced toward safety, Rook allowed himself a moment's reflection, the adrenaline still singing in his veins. They'd done it. Against all odds, they'd struck a blow against the Luminax that would echo through the annals of spacefaring history. We really pulled it off, Rook said, his voice a mix of disbelief and relief, and all without blowing ourselves to bits. I'm almost impressed. The crew erupted into laughter, the tension of the past hours bleeding away in a cascade of shared relief and camaraderie. They'd faced the darkness and against all odds emerged victorious. Don't get too comfortable, the wild-haired scientist cautioned, though his grin betrayed his words. We've still got a long way to go. True, Rook acknowledged, leaning back in his chair with a satisfied sigh. But for now, I think we've earned a little celebration. The Pixis sailed on, a testament to the resilience and resourcefulness of its crew. They were far from home, still adrift in a universe that seemed intent on testing their mettle at every turn. Yet, as they sped away from the scene of their triumph, Rook felt a burgeoning sense of optimism, a rarity in his line of work. Pixis, keep us on course, Rook said, a quiet determination in his voice. We've got a home to get back to. Understood, Captain. Onward we go. And so the Pixis charted its course through the star-speckled void, a beacon of defiance against a universe that cared little for the struggles of humanity. They were a motley crew, bound by fate and forged in the fires of adversity. But as they hurtled toward the unknown, one thing was certain. They were far from finished, and the universe had yet to see the last of Rook Thaler and his intrepid band of misfits. The Pixis coasted through the inky black like a smug cat that just got away with murder, its crew basking in the afterglow of their improbable victory. Inside, the air was thick with laughter and relief, like an old pub after a football match, if the stakes had been planetary annihilation. Rook Thaler, at the helm, wore a grin that was half triumph, half disbelief. Well, that's one for the history books, Rook said, leaning back and stretching his arms over his head, a cat with a canary still flapping in his mouth. Provided anyone's left to write them, quipped the wild-haired scientist, a man who looked like he slept in a centrifuge. Pixis, the AI with a personality you might describe as confidently sardonic, chimed in. Captain, I must say, your ability to survive against overwhelming odds is becoming statistically improbable. Don't jinx it, Rook replied, flicking a switch that did something important or at least looked like it did. Besides, I'm too pretty to die. Pretty's one word for it, said one of the crew, a wiry engineer who'd probably been born with a wrench in hand. As the ship sailed on, away from the wreckage and chaos they'd left behind, Rook allowed himself a moment of introspection. It wasn't often he had the luxury for such things, and he planned to squander it thoroughly. Think they'll remember us for this? He asked aloud, though not particularly to anyone. Remember you, Pixis replied, the AI voice smooth as a silken noose. Captain, you're as unforgettable as a bad hangover. Cheers to that, Rook grinned, raising an imaginary glass. Behind them, Earth was beginning to recover, or so they hoped. The Luminax, with their penchant for turning planets into fireworks displays, had their noses blooded. It was a temporary reprieve, sure, but sometimes you take what you can get, especially when the alternative involves being vaporized. What's next, then? The wild-haired scientist asked, eyes glittering with the kind of manic curiosity that usually ended in explosions. Back to Earth, bask in the glory, maybe pick up a medal or two, a crew member suggested, though the half-mocking tone was unmistakable. Rook shook his head. Nah, I think I'll pass. I leave the glory hogging to the politicians. Besides, who needs a medal when you've got a ship like Pyxis? Flattery will get you nowhere, Captain, Pyxis noted, though there was a detectable hint of digital amusement. Not looking to go anywhere, Rook shot back. Just everywhere. The crew settled into a comfortable silence, the kind of quiet companionship forged through shared peril and too many near-death experiences to count. They'd survived against all odds, and now the universe was their oyster, or at least a reasonably priced clam. Captain, we're receiving a signal from Earth, Pyxis announced, breaking the silence like a brick through a window. Looks like someone wants a chat. Rook sighed like a man about to face a particularly tedious relative. Put them through. Let's see what bureaucratic nonsense they want to throw at us now. The view screen flickered to life, revealing the stern visage of Admiral Kershaw. The kind of man who'd make a funeral director look chipper. Captain Thaler, Kershaw began, with all the warmth of a tax audit. I wanted to congratulate you on your success. Admiral Kershaw, Rook replied, adopting an equally formal tone just for the fun of it. I assume by success you mean not getting blown to bits. Kershaw's lips twitched, the closest he ever came to a smile. Indeed. The United Terran Fleet owes you a debt of gratitude. Well, I'll be sure to collect that in the form of time off, Rook said. Generous vacation policy in the fleet, I hope. We'll discuss your compensation once you're back planet-side, Kershaw said, clearly unamused. Though I have a feeling you have other plans. Astute as always, Admiral, Rook replied, his tone tinged with mock admiration. I'm thinking of taking Pyxis out for a spin. You know, check out the local nebulae, maybe start a bar fight on Mars. Very well, Kershaw said, cutting to the chase like a surgeon with a grudge. Just remember, Captain, the Luminax are still a threat. I expect you'll keep an eye out. You can count on it, Admiral, Rook said, his grin returning. We're nothing if not vigilant. With a curt nod, Kershaw ended the call, leaving the screen as blank as an amnesiac's diary. Vigilant? The wild-haired scientist echoed, raising an eyebrow. Is that what we're calling it these days? Call it whatever you like, Rook shrugged. But if those Luminax bastards think they can waltz back in without a fight, they've got another thing coming. The crew settled back into their routines, such as they were. They were a motley bunch, held together by necessity and a shared disdain for authority. And as Earth faded into the distance, Rook felt a familiar thrill, a sense of freedom that came from knowing the only person you had to take orders from was yourself. Pyxis, Rook called. How are our systems holding up? All systems nominal, Captain, Pyxis replied. Though I suggest we refrain from further high-risk maneuvers until we've performed a full diagnostic. Noted, Rook said, even as he plotted a course that would make a health inspector faint. Don't worry, I'll be gentle. As gentle as a bull in a zero-gravity china shop, the engineer muttered, not quite under his breath. That's the spirit, Rook laughed, clapping the man on the shoulder. After all, risk is just opportunity misspelled. The Pyxis continued its journey, cutting through space like a blade through butter, if the butter was existential dread and the blade was a barely functioning spaceship. They were heading into unknown territory, the kind of place where maps had warning labels and the local wildlife came with its own horror show. Captain, Pyxis interrupted, incoming transmission from an unregistered ship. Shall I patch it through? Rook sat up, intrigued. Go ahead. Maybe it's someone offering us a complimentary timeshare. The screen flickered again, revealing the face of a woman who looked like she could chew nails and spit out rivets. She had the kind of face that told you she'd been around the block, and possibly set fire to it for good measure. Rook Thaler, she said, her voice as dry as a desert at noon. I hear you're the man to talk to if you want something dangerous done." "You heard right," Rook said, leaning forward. "Name's Rook and you've got my attention." "Good," she replied. "Name's Talia. I've got a job for you if you're interested. Something that pays well and tastes just a little bit like trouble." "Trouble's my middle name," Rook said, though it wasn't, and he'd never bothered to check what it actually was. "Let's hear it." Talia's grin was feral, promising all sorts of delightful chaos. "Meet me at the Sargasso asteroid field. I'll give you the details there and bring Pyxis. I hear she's quite the ship." "You've done your homework," Rook observed, a little impressed despite himself. "I always do," Talia replied, the screen going dark before he could respond. "Looks like we're in for another adventure," Rook mused aloud, turning to his crew. "How about it? Up for a little more fun?" The wild-haired scientist gave a whoop of excitement, while the engineer groaned in mock despair. Pyxis, ever the voice of reason or entropy depending on your perspective, remained silent, though Rook knew the AI was as intrigued as he was. "Plot a course for the Sargasso asteroid field," Rook instructed, a sense of purpose settling over him like an old coat, worn but comfortable. "Let's see what Talia's got cooking." And so they set off, the Pyxis humming with new energy, a ship that was more than just metal and circuits. It was home of sorts, a place where chaos and camaraderie coexisted in a delicate balance that was always on the verge of tipping. Rook wouldn't have had it any other way. As the stars streaked past, a tapestry of light in the void, Rook allowed himself a grin. They were out here on the edge of nowhere, a ragtag crew with nothing to lose and everything to gain. It wasn't much, but it was theirs. "Here's to us," Rook said to the ship, the crew, the universe. "And to whatever comes next." The Pyxis sailed onward, a beacon of defiance in the endless dark. They were explorers, rebels, heroes, scoundrels, all titles that meant so little and so much all at once. And as they raced toward their next adventure, one thing was abundantly clear. The galaxy had better watch its back.